There are very few things in this world that are for certain, but death is one of them. It is an ever-present threat on the horizon for all. But to call it a threat implies that it in some way can be stopped or defeated. For in truth, it is an inevitability. There is nothing you can do to stop it, nothing you can do to end its final march. It is not a foe to be defeated, but a force of nature to be understood. One day you and all you have built will wither and die. All you have achieved will be forgotten. You may have descendants who will have their own legacies, not too dissimilar from your own, but they too will fade and die. Even immortals die, perhaps in grand sacrifices fending off whole armies, perhaps in something as mundane as a rogue cart crushing them. In the end, it does not matter. They will die. No force is immune. Your clan and culture, even your race and species, any order or power you acquire is for naught. Not even the gods will stay their hand from such a force, for one day they too will wither into dust and blow away into nothingness. To have command over death is mightier than you can imagine. But to take this step, you'll need to embrace this truth, the inevitability that you too will join what you command. That, in the end, no matter how vast your power or wide-stretching your empire, you will die. Fight it all you wish. In fact, I encourage you to do so. But nevertheless, you will fail. That speech is one a particular undead gave me when I asked what it was like to be as powerful as them. When we speak of the undead, there is one that first comes to mind. The masters of such a fort, the kings of the undead, if you will. The dreaded Lich. Now, to clarify a few things, I'm going to only talk about the humanoid Liches for today, as they can take many forms, all with unique quirks to them. The others I will address on a later occasion. But everyone fears the Lich, for they are indeed powerful beyond comprehension. In truth, they are probably the mightiest foe an adventurer, really anyone, could face. But what actually are they? Well, they are undead spellcasters and mages, wizards specifically, and you will find little exception to this. In order to become a Lich, you must be some form of wizard. You can have other focuses and skill sets too, but learning wizardry, no matter how limited, is a requirement in some form. You would also need to be an incredibly powerful mage, and you are going to be evil. Perhaps a Lich was a good person once, and indeed I believe many did become so to uphold some form of ideal, or to have an idealistic sense of virtue. And in pride, they thought they could control the power that they would wield. But in the end, they succumbed to darkness. Not to mention becoming one in and of itself is an inherently evil task. It's quite hard to describe how this fall from grace would work, actually, but imagine that speech I gave you at the very beginning, the really nihilistic one about how all will die. Now, imagine the feeling that speech would give you if that was all you felt and all you believed. Of course, with such a horrid worldview, you would inevitably start to care little about human life, or any form of life for that matter. This is why I would say there are no good Liches. None exist whatsoever. However, you will find an interesting variety of greys amongst their numbers, but the vast majority of them are certainly evil. Liches are also very meticulous in their processes. It took them a long time and a lot of power to achieve this state, and now that they can't die from old age, their plans can be generations in the making. By the time a Lich has actually started enacting its multi-stage plan, a few ages might have passed, and for this reason, a Lich's greatest enemy is not a holy figure of any sort, or a party of adventurers, but another Lich with a similar plan. With that being said, they are still quite susceptible to greed, and many, in fact I would say almost all of them, have gone mad in some form or another, usually due to the process which changes them in the first place. Many a Lich's plan has fallen apart because they have played their hand too early in order to steal a powerful artifact or to hoard forbidden knowledge. But how does one actually become a Lich, you might be asking? Well, the exact details are messy, and many aspects are missing to me, and even if I did know them, I wouldn't tell you. See, this information is hard to know and incredibly esoteric, and that is by design. For whoever the first Lich came to be, they did not want the art to spread, and so they made sure it didn't. Newer Liches, who no doubt stole the secrets in the first place, seem to have the same belief as well. But getting one thing out the way first, while being a wizard is a requirement, being a necromancer is not. See, while becoming a Lich is absolutely necromantic magic, you don't need to be a specialist in order to do so. Potentially, any powerful wizard can do so. And not all necromancers are likely to want such a fate. Technically speaking, I am a necromancer, as it was the first school of magic I began learning simply out of a morbid curiosity, and like many necromancers, have no real desire to raise a mass of undead or become one. Not permanently anyway. But there are still many wizards from other schools who would take it up upon fearing their own demise. And of course any necromancer that turned to the dark arts and cares very little for morality, well, they would almost certainly desire to become a Lich, so I suppose the stereotype is grounded in reality. Now, into their actual creation, for no wizard has stumbled into becoming one. It is a long, arduous, and dangerous process, a collection of rituals that must be performed perfectly, or else a horrid fate, worse than death, will afflict you. Each part that goes wrong has the potential to turn you into a different thing entirely instead of a Lich, and those things I will have to talk about another day, for they are just as interesting and numerous as the Lich itself. Just know that you are far more likely to fail than you are to succeed. The ritual that actually creates them has 3 steps. The first requires the creation of a magical artifact known as a phylactery. This typically takes the shape of an ornate box or locket of some form. In reality, any object with an open space on the inside that can be sealed and opened by the Lich would work. Detailed magical runes and sigils must be carved inside of this space. The reason it has this open space is because that is where the Lich's soul will be stored once it becomes one. The second step is the creation of a potion, which the full list of ingredients is unknown to me, but I would not share them even if I knew them. But there are all sorts of rumours that it's venoms of the most foul kind and the hearts of infants and that sort of thing. What I do know is that there is a time limit on the gathering of these ingredients. They must be harvested freshly and within a short period of time from each other. It makes this step very time sensitive and probably the most difficult one. Finally, they must perform the ritual, connecting their soul to the phylactery, drinking the dark concoction, and sacrificing a sentient creature with some significance and often a connection to the Lich. And in order to perform this ritual, they must be able to cast spells at what we call a 9th level. That is a requirement. After which, the Lich will die, horribly and in pure agony, with their hair falling out, skin withering, aging in seconds, their muscles will deform, and their flesh will decay. And I suspect they are in this state for quite a while. But if everything was done perfectly, the Lich's soul will be bound into the phylactery, and it would have consumed the sacrifice's soul. Then their body will rise again, inhabiting the same one it did in life. Although how it looks at this point depends purely on luck from what it seems. And from here on out, if the body is destroyed, the Lich will rise again, within a week in a body identical to its current state. The only way to kill them would be to destroy its phylactery, which is a lot easier said than done. The Lich also has to keep up the sacrifices. This is not a one-and-done thing, but something they must repeat. But to what degree, I'm not sure of. I imagine it's not that common, and from what it seems, not every Lich has the same requirements. but I could say anywhere from between once a month to once every 10 years, or maybe 100 years. It seems different to every Lich, so speculation would just be a waste of time. This does mean, however, that they cannot go to a tower in the corner of the earth and just pretend they don't exist, lock themselves off from the world. No, they have to interact eventually. So now that they are a Lich, let us get into what they are now capable of. For they are mighty indeed. For a start, they keep all of the spells they knew in life, with an exception to any magic that could heal someone. For no true undead can cast such spells. But since pure wizards can't cast these spells to begin with, this is of no consequence to them. And because almost all Liches are very powerful wizards, they already have an incredible template to begin with. I would not begin to list what spells they could actually have, for it could potentially be anything. I would say that necromancy spells are more likely, but as I said before, it's not actually needed, and it's no guarantee by any means. But what is that it would certainly be knowledgeable, skilled, and experienced in using many spells all the way up to 9th level, and even if they don't have a spell, they certainly know everything about it. Oh, and good luck trying to affect them with any form of magics, especially holy ones, for while they are not immune to them, they are a lot more resistant to things of a holy nature than they are an arcane one. Not to mention the fact that, well, many of them are just powerful enough to resist something outright. Although this will fade and wither as a fight goes on, for even the mightiest beasts tire. Or should I say, fatigue, as they don't really sleep anymore. The Lich also has the ability to paralyze someone with but the touch of their bony finger. And depending on how tough you are, this can last a whole minute. And there's nothing stopping them from just doing it again, even while you're still affected by the last one. This actually makes it the perfect tool for them to kidnap someone, for one reason or another, typically for a sacrifice, or just to gain information from them. But considering that this actually harms you, and quite nastily I ought to say, this might just kill you outright. I should also note that they can magically induce fear into anyone that looks into its eyes. This frightening gaze can cause even the most brave and stalwart heroes to flee for their lives, magically induced of course, although this one is something that, once conquered by the person, they cannot be affected by it for a long while at least. The Lich also has the ability to kind of explode in a burst of negative energy, draining the souls of those close to them and damaging them heavily. This is something they typically do when too many people are too close to them for their liking, and this is actually a good indication that you have them worried. If they're using this, they feel that they're on the back foot. It also has what we call true sight, and they can see even further than most people can. Meaning, if you have an illusion, or are invisible, or a creature is hiding its true nature, they will see the truth for what it really is. This also just makes them really good at noticing things, so if you plan to sneak up on one, well, just make sure you're not doing it alone. To top it all off, they are completely immune to having their minds being affected by magic, and they cannot feel any form of fear themselves, nor can their body be paralyzed in any form, and they are completely immune to being poisoned, although that last one should be obvious, I feel. They also don't need to eat, breathe, or sleep, although the soul sacrificing is a requirement they still have. I guess they just eat people now, and less regularly. And, as I said before, you cannot kill them in combat, for if they do fall, they will just revive right next to their phylactery, and so finding and destroying that is needed. But many phylacteries are protected in some form, and need special conditions in order to be destroyed. Not all of them have this, mind you, but I've heard more than one tale of a party adventurers needing to throw an artifact into a volcano where it was crafted, to know that you should almost certainly be ready for this. And keep in mind, this is just a base Lich. This is all the stuff they get just from transforming, and they are going to get even more powers with time, and there are potentially further transformations that they can do that I just don't have time to talk about today, but another one, I'm sure. And this is not to mention that almost every Lich has an army of followers, and typically all of them have found a way to have an infinite army of undead. And given their lust for power, knowledge, and artifacts, it is safe to assume that every Lich is covered in magical items, with almost all of them holding at least one legendary storied item, or 6, knowing them. And of course, if you are attacking them in their lair, then prepare for all sorts of magical shenanigans, as well as hordes of undead, constructs, and even bound demons. Some can even sap more lingering necrotic energy to recover their spells that they've already used. Fighting a Lich is a monumentous task, and if you seek to kill them, you will need to do so more than once. To end them, you might have to fight them 3 or 4 times before you can actually finally destroy their phylactery. And even then, there's a slight chance they come back. Let me quickly add their weaknesses real fast. Their physical body is actually quite weak and frail, at least compared to things of their power scale, say ancient dragons. So if you could somehow get up close and power through its magics, and you must be wielding a magical weapon, then you can actually bring it down quite quickly if you are an apt fighter of some sort. But this is by no means likely to happen, and sadly, and almost humorously, that's it. That is the only physical weakness they will have. But personality-wise, that's a different question. But as I said before, they can have a wide variety of characters. But since almost all of them are some form of greedy, ambitious, prideful, and anywhere from slightly mad to completely insane. So with these traits, it can be pretty easy to see how there's quite a few ways to avoid an interaction with a Lich, or maybe even manipulate them, if you're not out to slay them. And see, that's something I want to get into. The best way to deal with a Lich is just that, avoidance. Unless you are on a quest to slay that very Lich, or they are going to consistently try and stop something you have to do, it's actually quite likely that you can come to an agreement with them. As an example of this, I'm going to tell you the tale of an encounter I had with one Lich, who me and my party didn't actually fight. We have fought many Liches in the past, don't get me wrong, but this one's far more interesting. See, we were clearing out a dungeon in hopes to find an ancient sword for our barbarian. He really likes his swords, and he heard that this one was particularly the greatest in the land, and so we could really use the power boost. Our searches led us to an abandoned dwarven mine that was currently being occupied by goblins. But as we approached one of the tribes, they exploded in a ball of green flame. At first we wondered if the goblins were just warring with each other and somehow got a serious arms upgrade, but that was not the case. We eventually found a lady who was casting such fireballs, and got to talking. It did not take us long to learn that something was up with this person, and so began to question her and her story, in which she quickly broke her disguise and revealed that she was indeed a Lich. But since neither party wanted to waste time and energy in fighting an equal, we just asked why we were both here. We told her about the sword, and she told us about a different artifact she found through magical means, a crystal ball that gives the user the ability to double the amount of spells they can cast in a single day. And since we had the same goal with different wants for rewards, we just went along together. The cleric of our party was none too happy about this arrangement, as in truth I too was quite weary, but fighting a Lich would have taken quite a lot out of us, and we knew she would just come back in no time at all looking for the artifact again. And, luckily, she just saw us as a time saver. My fear was that once we actually reached the sword, she would decide she wanted it more and go back on our deal. But luckily, that never happened. Instead, we got to talking, as I'm often wont to do, babbling on the usual, and we learned that we had quite similar backgrounds, descending from nobility, knowing all the same languages, and having similar interests. Eventually, I blurted out my name while telling her a story. I said something to the effect of, "And I, Calton Stoneheart, won't stand for such a thing." And then bizarrely, she raised an eyebrow and just asked, "Stoneheart?" in confusion. I asked why that name was important. So anyway, that's how I met my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. Part of me still thinks, were it not for the relation, she would have turned on us at the end of the dungeon. And part of me is actually kind of sickened to learn that a relative of mine is a Lich despite the great distance. I still know that she is an evil being at heart, one I know not to trust as far as I can throw, but having someone that powerful as a connection could be useful one day. It's just, I don't know, I feel bizarre about the whole thing, as I'm sure you can imagine. Oh, I did also get my current arcane focus from that dungeon, though. It's the cane you've seen me with. Like the crystal ball, it allows me to cast more spells than I would usually be able to, though nowhere near to the same degree. The head of the cane is shaped like the maw of a dragon, and within it holds a crystal ball that actually... Ugh, I caught myself rambling again. I ought to stop doing that, I keep going off topic. Back to the Lich. You can see why my portents of doom are not overstated. Truly, they are one of the most powerful forms a wizard can take up, although the damage to one's soul and stain to their morality is sickening to me. Truly, were they not so intelligent and self-controlling, despite their inherent madness, I would probably say that they are one of the greatest threats to this land. The main problem is that you just can't get rid of them. They always come back. Finding a way to end one is an ordeal that should be left to the greatest among us. And even then, once you do so, after fighting for years and years, your toil, sacrifice, and bloodshed, there will just be another to take its place. To end the Lich would be to end ambitions amongst us. For there is always some who are willing to do anything to get what they want. For in truth, you can never remove such wants and greeds. The nature that makes us human is also the part of us that makes us susceptible to falling to such desires. We will never be rid of them, and many have even questioned if I would one day fall to such a temptation due to my studies of necromancy as an academic interest. And I shall say I have a loose willingness to allow evil to exist in the world, as I proved with my own great ancestor. But I assure you, that is never going to happen. But I am still glad that people ask and check in on me. Ending a Lich may be difficult, but ending the very idea of one to make sure the world is rid of them all is a fruitless task. As if ending death itself, which you know by now, that is impossible. But like all tasks that are for the greater good, we should still try. We should never give up on hope. Though it may be fruitless and inevitable, like death, we should fight it, regardless of its inevitability. It's just the right thing to do. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But, till next we meet, fellow traveller, have a good day.